14,400 years ago, someone knelt down at a fire in a black stone desert and pulled out a flatbread. They burnt part of it, flicked the burnt bits into the ashes, got on with their evening. Those crumbs are still there, and they have caused an enormous problem. Because the people who dropped them were not farmers. Not one human being anywhere on Earth was growing food yet, and wouldn't be for another 4,000 years. Bread is older than agriculture, which means the order you were taught is backwards. It's supposed to go: we invent farming. Farming gives us grain. Grain gives us flour. Flour gives us bread. Tidy, sensible. Bread is the reward at the end of civilization's first big idea. Except somebody was baking 4,000 years before the first field existed anywhere on the planet. So bread isn't what farming gave us. Bread might be the reason we started. Now hold that next to your kitchen. You ate bread today. You probably didn't notice. It was under something, or around something, or going stale in a bag on the counter. It's the cheapest thing in the shop, the one item you put in the trolley without checking the price. The people at that fire spent most of a day on one loaf of it, which is what I actually want to explain. Why would anybody do that? Because I'm going to show you exactly what making one of these cost. And when you see it, the obvious response is, mate, go and catch a rabbit. 20 minutes. No kneeling on the floor grinding rocks together until your arms give out. They knew that. These were hunters. They had meat. They had a desert full of animals walking up to waterholes. They ground the grass anyway, for thousands of years. There's a reason. First, how we know any of this. Northeastern Jordan, a region called the Black Desert, which is exactly as welcoming as it sounds. A plain of dark volcanic rock running to the horizon. Buried in it is a site called Shubayqa 1. 2 round stone buildings, each with a fireplace set into the middle of the floor. Somebody built those. Somebody chose that spot, hauled the stones, and made a room with a fire in the center of it. And in the ash of those fireplaces, an archaeobotanist from Copenhagen found something she couldn't identify. Not seeds, not nuts, not burnt wood, just crumbs. 24 little charred lumps that didn't match anything. They were breadcrumbs. Somebody's dinner, slightly overdone, left in a fire pit, and then sat there quietly for 14,000 years. And they weren't a fluke. That same site turned up the largest collection of grinding and pounding stones anyone has found from that period in the whole southern Levant. This wasn't one person's odd experiment. This was a place where people processed plants, constantly, as a skill. Now the work. And I want you down on the floor for this one. You're kneeling. A flat slab of basalt in front of you, a smaller stone in your hands, a small heap of wild grass seed between them. Wild grain doesn't cooperate. Modern wheat has had 10,000 years of breeding to make it behave, to hold still on the stalk and let go of its husk. Wild grain does neither. It scatters the second it's ripe, and it clings to its jacket like it's cold. So first you gather it, one small head at a time. Then you get the husks off, hundreds of them by hand. Then you push the stone. The seeds crack and skid out sideways, and you sweep them back with the edge of your hand and push again. Your shoulders complain within minutes. Your wrists go next. The heap barely changes. Someone nearby is talking, and you're not listening, because you're counting. The way you count when something is taking longer than it should. The sun moves, you're still there. Then you sieve it, knead it, slap it against the hot wall of the fire pit, and wait. 1 flatbread. That's your day. So why not the rabbit? Here's the thing about hunting that documentaries leave out. It fails. Constantly. You track something for hours and come home with nothing. And everyone can see you came home with nothing. Meat is brilliant, and meat is a gamble. It runs, it fights, it hides. And once you've got it, you're on a clock, a few days before it turns. Grain does not run. Grain sits exactly where it is and waits for you to come back. And once it's flour, it keeps. For months. Through a bad winter, through a stretch when the hunt comes back, empty 3 days running. That's what the day of grinding buys. Not a nicer dinner. A dinner that's definitely going to be there. Which, when you have children, is not a small thing. And it travels. Try carrying a deer. But that's the practical answer, and it isn't the whole one. Because grinding does something to grain that nobody at that fire could have understood, and all of them could feel. Raw, wild grain is mostly locked. It's wrapped in chaff your body can't break down, and the good stuff inside is bound up in a form you can't fully reach. You can eat it, you just don't get much out of it. Grind it, sieve it, wet it, put it on a hot stone, and it opens up. The chaff is gone. The starch becomes reachable. Even the protein gets easier to use. That's what the day on your knees actually bought. More food. Out of the same amount of food. They had no words for any of that. They just knew that if you did the work, you felt better afterwards, and so did your children. And there's one more clue about what these people were doing, and it's my favorite thing in the whole story. At that site, they weren't just eating the bread. There's roasted gazelle meat in the same picture. Bread and meat together at the same fire. An archaeologist from University College London called it the earliest evidence of anything we could really call a cuisine, which is a careful academic way of saying 14,000 years ago, somebody invented the sandwich. Not survival food, not fuel, a meal. Someone put two things together because the combination was better than either one on its own. And that instinct, that fussiness, that refusal to just eat the thing and move on, is about as human as it gets. Also, one detail I've been saving. Their flour wasn't only grass. A huge share of what they were grinding came from the tubers of a water plant, a root out of a marsh. They were pulling flour out of a swamp, and it worked. There's one more possibility, and it's the one I keep thinking about. A food this expensive, a day of somebody's labor for one flatbread, doesn't have to be dinner. It can be an occasion. Some archaeologists think that's what early bread was. Not a staple at all, but the thing you made when it mattered. For guests, for a gathering, to show you could. The food you go to unreasonable trouble over, for people you want to impress or look after. If you've ever watched someone spend 6 hours on a meal that gets eaten in 20 minutes, you'll recognize it immediately. And soft food does something else, quietly. A warm flatbread can be eaten by the very old, by the sick, by someone with no teeth left. There are people at that fire who can't chew roast gazelle. They can eat this. Now put that next to the grinding stone. They knew where this grass grew. And you can imagine the thought arriving in somebody, on one of those long afternoons on their knees. Why is it all the way over there? What if it grew here, near the fire, where I could reach it? That's the idea one of the researchers put forward, that wanting bread more often may have been part of what pushed people into growing grain on purpose. Farming not as a stroke of genius, farming as somebody trying to shorten the walk. And everything else comes after. Fields, villages, storehouses, cities. So how confident should you be in all that? Partly. Here's what actually survives. 24 burnt crumbs from one site. That's real, and it's remarkable, and it's also 24 crumbs. We don't know whether bread was everyday food there or something they made a handful of times a year. We don't know who made it, whether one person in that camp was the one who was good at it, or everybody took a turn. And the big idea, where wanting bread leads to farming and farming leads to everything, that's a proposal. A reasonable one, from the people closest to the evidence. But a proposal, not a result. Which is allowed. 14,000 years is a long way to see, and we're looking through 24 crumbs in a fireplace. What's solid is strange enough anyway. People who did not have to make bread made bread, over and over, long before it was easy. There's one last detail, and I've been holding it back. Those crumbs weren't scattered through the site. They were in fireplaces that were used right at the end, shortly before the whole place was abandoned. Everybody left and never came back, which is consistent with something we can't prove and I can't stop thinking about, that the bread was made because they were leaving. A last meal in a spot they'd lived in, gathered around a fire one final time. Somebody spent their day on it. Somebody burnt part of it and flicked the black bits into the ashes. Then they walked away. And those crumbs sat in that fireplace for 14,000 years, through everything that has ever happened, waiting for somebody to notice them. You can buy that same thing for less than a cup of coffee, sliced in a bag. You'll probably throw some of it out this week when it goes green in the corner. We didn't get better at wanting it, we just got better at getting it.